So it's been 7 years since the release of the last mainline South Park video game, Fractured But Whole, and fans have been waiting in anticipation to see what Matt and Trey would come up with for their new game. Well, as of a few days ago, that new game is finally released, and it's called South Park Snow Day. So far this game has received less than favorable reviews, and I sort of wanted to throw my hat in the ring, as IGN somehow ranked this game lower than Gollum. And as someone who has played a lot of Gollum, no, this game is definitely better. Snow Day follows the events that transpired in the previous title and takes place in an iced-over South Park, dealing with a brutal snowstorm. As a result of the harsh conditions, school is cancelled, but that doesn't stop the kids from playing outside. We'll once again be playing as a new kid, with similar fantasy-themed elements like in Stick of Truth, but with completely new rules, as each game, we just keep getting too OP. However, this game is completely different from both the Stick of Truth and Fractured But Whole, as rather than doing another RPG, they decided to go with a hack-and-slash roguelike instead. This may be confusing, as the previous two installments were extremely successful, but after listening to this interview from Matt Stone, it's apparent that the duo was burnt out from making these types of games.
I think that there's so many great genres of games, and the two guys we have to get interested in this is me and Trey. Trey and I have totally different tastes in games, where I could just play a fight game all the time. I'm fine with that. I like strategy games a little bit. I like big Far Cry kind of games.
Well, you said yours different than Trey. What is Trey?
Trey's like into RPGs and Dungeons and Dragons and real strategy games. He's a total board game freak. He loves board games and those kind of more cerebral and rules-based things. And again, I don't at all.
So it's clear that Trey already got his 2 games. They did everything they wanted with those games, and that this is more of a game that Matt likes, as well as something smaller scale that can be added onto later. Makes sense to me, but this threw off a lot of fans that had been waiting all these years, that had grown fond of the 2D art style and gameplay mechanics of the previous games.
I think we tried to find a scale which was frankly, this game as a $29.99 game, that seemed like the right size for us to try 3D for the first time, make it work, make all those systems work without biting off too much and failing at it, frankly. You know what I mean?
So keep in mind, this game is $30, so expecting a fully fleshed out 10 to 20 plus hour gaming experience just isn't to be expected. And truthfully, nobody can really give a full review on this game yet, because as it sounds, they plan on adding new content to it with each episode release, so hopefully that will flesh it out better than the game in its current state. This video is going to be mostly a gameplay review, but I do want to touch on one big reason I think this game isn't getting as good of reviews as you'd expect from a South Park title, and that is just that the game isn't very funny. Much of South Park's humor is from their pop culture references, but for this game they wanted to focus all the humor on interactions that were relevant to the game and story, so that the game could be a timeless experience. In the previous South Park titles, I'd pretty much be at least smiling for most of the game, with a few solid moments of just dying laughing. That just never happened once in Snow Day. Because this is the main premise for why we all interact with South Park, to laugh and enjoy the absurdity of the show. So even if a South Park game were to completely suck, yet the story kept up in terms of entertainment with the shows, specials, and other video games, I don't think anyone would really complain as much. I mean, I'm pretty sure the IGN reviewer would, but the average South Park enjoyer that probably just bought the game to play out another episode of the show would probably really like the game if that were the case. This is why I'm hoping the content added on later makes up for this weakness, and if this is the case, I'd probably say this game is worth the $30, but that's just me. But one thing I do really enjoy about this game is that it is co-op up to 4 players, so I reached out to some top level speedrunners to see if they'd run the game with me. The team includes Hardcore Cheese 5, the world record holder for every single Stick of Truth speedrun category, Qazplm, the world record holder for every Fractured But Whole category, Toxicpinhead, world record holder for South Park Tenderman's Revenge, and then finally me, the guy who gets carried by all of them. The rest of the review will be focused on the gameplay, as well as what we've come up with the speedrun so far. I hope you all enjoy. Before we get more into this run, I'd like to give a special thanks to today's video sponsor, HelloFresh. HelloFresh is the best meal kit delivery service out there, sending out high quality ingredients straight to your doorstep. Choose from over 30 different recipes to suit your dietary needs, whether that be vegetarian or vegan options, or you can even sort by high protein and carb smart meals to keep you on track with your diet. Personally, I'm a big fan of the quick prep meals, some of them only requiring 10 minutes to prepare. HelloFresh even has a line of desserts to choose from, which all look amazing. And if you do decide to subscribe today, you'll get a free dessert item per box while your subscription remains active. All it takes is using my code or link in the description choosing out each meal plan depending on how many people in your household that need fed, and then about a week after checking out, your first box will appear on your doorstep, refrigerated and ready to go. To get started, again, check the description for my link or sign up on HelloFresh.com with my code EZScape16FM to get 16 meals for free, plus free desserts for life, which is honestly an amazing deal, and I'm pretty confident you will enjoy it. Thanks again to HelloFresh for sponsoring me. Now let's get back to the speedrun. As of recording this video, this game of course is still pretty new, so speedrun rules haven't been fully decided yet. But surprisingly, there was a load remover made after the first day by Street Bat Guy, so shoutouts to them for the same day delivery on that. For this game there is a tutorial section, but it isn't playable in co-op, so luckily for us, we'll get to skip it and instead just start our run in chapter 1. I'd say it's pretty likely that all chapters becomes the main speedrun category for this game anyways, meaning the tutorial gets skipped regardless of what mode you're playing in, which would be really nice so co-op runs can be directly compared to solo. But then again, we could just stick to good old any percent and force all co-op players to play through the tutorial individually first, and then make connecting through the matchmaking interface part of the run. I mean, as you're about to learn, this game has a ton of RNG, that even if this was included, network connection would probably be one of the least RNG reliant parts of the run. For this run we decided that Hardcore Cheese should host a lobby, since he probably has the fastest menuing out of all of us from Stick of Truth runs. At the beginning of each chapter there will be a bullshit trial to decide the rules for each game. Each player in the party will get to choose from one upgrade card and one bullshit card. The cards are completely random, and upgrade cards just give power-ups to whichever weapons and abilities we have selected, and then the bullshit cards are special abilities with limited uses per chapter. For example, in this case I ended up getting an upgrade for my bow, which was kind of unlucky, but then I got a pretty good bullshit card Meteor Storm, which for the time being we decided would be the optimal choice for the speedrun, as flying meteors pretty much spawn from the sky, doing massive amounts of AoE damage. The enemies also get some cards as well, but I'll discuss those more in a little bit. In the background you can see us completing the first level of chapter 1. The vast majority of levels require enemies to be cleared out before proceeding. Sometimes this literally means all enemies, but sometimes it's only some. Like in this level we completely skip all the bottom row enemies, and instead just cleared out the top. I was a bit confused here as I saw a speech bubble above Jimmy's head, which made me think we could continue, but this was only bait, and we actually need to wait for the victory text to pop up before being able to proceed. But I mean, good thing I didn't help them clear out enemies anyways, because my connection was acting up all over the place, making me fly all around. I will say overall the online connection is pretty good, as during my casual playthrough, I really didn't notice much, if any lag whatsoever when playing with a group. But during this run, there definitely were some laggy points. After clearing a level, most of the time we'll be greeted by either Jimmy or Henrietta to give us a card power up, and then afterwards the end gate will open up. Once the first player touches an end gate, a countdown will start from 20, and after it completes, the level will play. But if we can, ideally all players will enter the end gate at roughly the same time, so in a co-op speedrun, each player definitely does need to carry their own weight. Next up I should probably explain how the combat works, although I'm sure just by watching, you're able to figure it out. In this game there are no classes like in Stick of Truth, and instead you can choose from 3 weapons: a dagger, shield and sword, or two-handed axe. For this run, Cheese, Quaz, and I all chose the dagger, while Toxic went with the axe. The dagger seems useful, as throughout the game you will collect this stuff called Dark Matter, which can be used to unlock perks on the skill tree. And the melee perks, which are supposed to grant a 20% buff to the daggers, actually provides them a 40% buff instead. So in a New Game Plus run like the one we're running, there's a strong argument for them being the fastest DPS, especially compounded with the bleed effect, which gets even more powerful as the weapon is upgraded through cards. Also, the aerial attack with the dagger is a dive that moves at the same speed as the sprint, if not maybe a little faster with straight lines, and doesn't require using any stamina at all. However, the charge attack with the axe does seem like it might be even faster DPS than the dagger, because from Toxic's point of view, spinning to win does seem like a valid strategy. Initially I thought the dagger movement would make it a confident first place for weapon choice just due to the movement tech, but Toxic really didn't have many issues keeping up with us, as rolling is actually the fastest movement option, which any build can use. Sure, he will need to run in between rolls, which wastes stamina, but that only matters when in combat because otherwise stamina is infinite. Also, there's a double roll perk which allows you to roll twice in a row, and with that, it probably means the dagger dive matters even less. But one thing that's for certain is that the secondary items for the most part are pretty useless, and there aren't many situations where you'd want to use them, these being a bow, a staff, and a wand. Personally, I chose the bow as my option, as it is a bit more accurate than the other two, and the main situations I'd want to use it in are for dealing with faraway enemies or helping a teammate finish off someone quickly. Although there definitely is an argument for the wand, which basically just shoots out a flamethrower. This can be useful for fights like the Kyle boss fight, where he tends to teleport around a ton, so the ability to get him burned to passively damage him becomes pretty beneficial. But again, for the most part, these weapons won't see much action, other than in the event the enemy plays a bullshit card to turn melee weapons into noodles. So in addition to the weapon choices, there are also 8 special powers to choose from. I'm not going to go over all of these, but some of them that I see being useful would first be Fart Escape. This can be used to inflict toxin on enemies, but in my opinion, this ability is much more suited for platforming and movement. It gives a ton of vertical height compared to jumping, and as long as you don't touch the ground, you can continue gliding with a slow descent. The problem is, so much of the speedrun is reliant on killing enemies quickly, that something that only allows for minor time saves probably just isn't worth using. But if there are any skips found in this game, it's possible that they would require using it. Although so far it does seem levels were constructed with this in mind, as invisible walls are located everywhere in this game, extending far higher than the jump will allow you to go. Next is a healing totem, which some of us used for this first run, since we were playing on hard mode, but I'm sure later on if anyone decides to speedrun this seriously, it would get swapped out. The next useful ability would be Bull Rush, as not only is it a fast DPS option, but also probably the fastest movement option in the game, even if only able to be used for a short period of time. I wouldn't be surprised to see it used for niche speedrun tech later on. And then finally, the most useful ability that I think will always be used in every setup is a snow turret, which locks onto enemies and fires snowballs at them. This does pretty solid damage, especially if using 5 at once, which is a cap on how many can be spawned per player. So I suppose it might be possible to use 20 cannons at once, but may not be feasible, as the way abilities are used are by building up the pissed off meter, which increases whenever dealing or taking damage. So it's not like you can just spawn them infinitely whenever you want. It's also possible that the most optimal abilities haven't been figured out yet, as they do get buffed by upgrade cards, so there may be a specific card out there that makes certain abilities better than others. Although I assume resetting runs for upgrade cards probably just isn't worth it outside of farming for good ones before chapter 1. This is because there are far greater luck determiners like bullshit cards that you most likely would farm for first. Like sure, you do probably want to farm for a good bullshit card for yourself like Meteor Storm or Laser Eyes, but more importantly, you need to avoid bad enemy bullshit cards at all costs. Like not only are these cards random, but when they're played within a level is random too, and some are just way more broken than others. For starters, they pause gameplay, so if one gets played, you're losing time no matter what. But the worst cards are probably noodled, which turns melee weapons into noodles. And also reanimate, which not only revives dead enemies, but gives them invincibility for a short period of time. So you can see when you're met with a card like this and a challenge where you need to keep enemies out of a cube for a certain period of time, just isn't very fun. But I guess that is the point of the bullshit cards. At this point, you're probably noticing a trend with this game, and that there is a ton of luck involved with these cards. But somehow in a speedrunning context, this isn't even the most luck dependent aspect, and that the levels within the chapters are also randomized to a certain extent. For example, in chapter 1, we're meant to collect some gas and keys for a truck to free Randy out of the ice. In our speedrun, the keys spawn behind us, but in a chapter 1 speedrun done by Qaz, the keys and gas spawn in completely different spots. You would think in this case Qaz loses a bunch of time since the load zones for his areas are further away. But for some reason the area we got in our co-op run included an ambush that required all enemies to be defeated before reaching the area with the keys, whereas Qaz had no ambush at all. Then again in our run after entering the zone for the gas, we got an extra area where we just got a free card, which is cool, but I guess not in a speedrun context as it wasted a lot of time. In Qaz's run, he gets no free card. Now listen, I know Matt and Trey are well known for trolling speedrunners in the past, but this probably has to be their greatest troll yet. I guess my biggest issue with this mechanic is that you, the player, are never really made aware that it exists. You just have to play enough to notice it. But it also means that you could potentially play this game like 20 times and still have areas you haven't explored. Which, fair enough, this is supposed to be a roguelike apparently. But in reality, this game is about as close to a roguelike as Fortnite is. So as far as speedrunning goes, I'd have to say pretty much nothing you do in the game really matters at all, as long as you're being somewhat diligent, because the difference in level structure is so consequential to the run. And then when you factor in upgrade cards, bullshit cards, enemy AI, and also AI teammates, this 3D platform hack and slash somehow has more RNG in one individual element than Stick of Truth and Fractured Butthole have in their entirety, which is kind of wild to think about. Also, I don't necessarily think RNG plays any bearing on whether a game is fun to play or not, but this is a speedrun review, and as it stands, all chapter speedruns seem to have zero chance at being competitive. But it does seem like people are starting to do speedruns of individual chapters. The one on screen coming from I Swim Fly, which just came out as I was recording this video. In their run, they chose to use the axe with Bull Rush and Fart Escape. By starting off with a pretty OP card called Hurricane, they're able to do a ton of damage with the axe, all while moving at pretty fast speeds. It's worth noting that this run was done on easy mode, so it makes sense that the healing totem wouldn't be needed, nor the snow turrets, as the axe was already doing plenty of damage. This means the pissed off meter stays full a lot of the time, allowing them to use Bull Rush whenever to sprint ahead quickly. With good card RNG and no additional ambushes, I Swim Fly managed to beat Qaz's time by 3 minutes. So while it does seem that individual chapters might be competitive to a certain degree, it just doesn't seem like the full game will be viable unless someone can figure out how RNG works, or maybe even find a couple skips. I guess while on the topic, it's probably worth mentioning that so far, other than minor optimizations, no real skips have been found yet. As far as co-op runs go, the only skips I see being viable would be ways to get you collectible objects quicker, as there are a handful of objectives that only require objects around the level to be collected and brought to a destination. But still, in a lot of these cases, even after returning certain objects, you have to clear enemies anyways, so by skipping past a bunch of enemies, you may be potentially making it more difficult to clear a level by leaving them alive. And that's sort of the issue with theory crafting skips for this game, because most end of area triggers aren't activated until talking to Jimmy, or clearing out enemies, or both. Although Toxic suspects the end of level trigger at the end of chapter 2 is active the entire level, as you only get access to it after completing the boss fight, and this may be the case for other areas too. But first, we need to find a way out of bounds. Like I said before, the invisible walls are extremely high in this game, and so far we haven't even been able to find a way out of bounds, nor a way to clip through walls that doesn't just result in a soft lock. Since the release of this game, I've been checking social media sites daily, looking for potential glitches, and I have managed to find a few clips. The first clip I found on YouTube Shorts, where the new kid is using the aerial attack of the axe from way high up in the air, and must build so much velocity they go right through the floor. Pretty cool glitch, if we could just figure out how they got up there in the first place. Then I stumbled across a clip from the YouTuber Tags44, who managed to find a glitch that allowed him to fly high up into the air, which in theory could be used for future skips. But first we need to figure out how to reproduce a glitch and understand why it works. We do theorize this to be FPS related, as you can get some pretty glitchy movement in this game by uncapping the FPS and mashing pause while moving around within a level. However, this buggy movement doesn't seem to give any vertical momentum, which is what we're looking for, but maybe it will have some applications later on. But it could also not be FPS related, as it seems that Tags is playing on Xbox, which I would assume to be capped to 60 FPS. Furthermore, this is a YouTube short, so a bit of the screen is cut out, so it's difficult to tell if he's playing online or not, as like we saw earlier in my run, internet issues did seem to give some random height, but I'm unsure if online bugginess can even result in height any higher than fart escaping. So as of right now, we're stumped. But I did find some trainers that exist to modify jump height, and I'm sure some of the modders in the community will be able to test stuff out and find trigger boxes, so really it's all just a matter of time. The only other interesting glitch I stumbled across was a person that managed to duplicate dark matter by apparently mashing buy and refund on the perks menu rapidly. As far as I can tell, they are the only person to get this to work, and they also mentioned that the glitch seems to be patched. But I don't think this game has even had a patch yet. But they are playing on the Switch version, so it's possible that it's a console or Switch exclusive glitch, or that there's certain conditions that need to be in place for the trick to work. While a glitch like this does seem pretty powerful, in reality, I don't think it makes a big difference for the speedrun, because it would just mean non-NG plus categories would essentially just be NG plus, but with a bit of dark matter duplication at the start, and NG plus would just take over at that point as a superior category. But this is probably already the case, as NG plus just has more interesting speed tech. Going back to our run, there really isn't too much to point out, as most of the levels are linear in route and design. 1 second we're beating the shit out of some first graders, and the next, we are probably still beating the shit out of some first graders. I will say the boss fights are pretty fun, especially the Cartman one, which I do find pretty difficult, as well as the final boss, which I'd rather not spoil, but outside of those, I'm pretty sure we all get the gameplay loop by this point. We finished our run with a time of 1:05:13, which with nothing to compare to, I suppose is alright. I really have no idea what an optimal run of this game would look like, and to be honest, I don't really plan on finding out, but a sub hour is probably easily doable. For what it's worth, I do actually enjoy this game, but I do have to admit, overall, it's pretty mid. And if I were to give it a score myself, out of 10, I would give it a 5.5. meaning it's just slightly above average. Like at the end of the day, the game wasn't advertised to be anything it wasn't. And after listening to Matt Stone's interview again, after having already finished the game, he's pretty spot on with what they delivered. In terms of story, the game is only about an episode long, and the max amount of time I could see anyone spending on this, if they were really taking their time and also playing on hard difficulty, would be about 5 hours. If you're not a fan of South Park at all, I really can't see this game being worth it for you in any context, but if you do enjoy it and don't mind spending the $30, I'd say go for it. I would say the deciding factor for me on whether I would buy this game had I not already bought and paid for it would be whether I was able to play the game with friends or not. Being able to coordinate and shoot shit with the homies is 10 times more fun than playing with bots will ever be. And I think the co-op aspect is where this game truly shines the most, which is why I give it above average rating. I sort of noticed this with other reviews, that the people that gave the game the more favorable reviews actually had friends to play with. It's just unfortunate that there's no local co-op or online PvP, which I think could have changed my score up quite a bit. I'm really hoping the content they have planned to add later on ends up being good and that they actually follow through with it, as if I'm able to squeeze out even a little more content following each episode, I'd be happy with my purchase. And with that being said guys, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to leave a like, as it's the best way to show support. Special thanks again to Toxicpinhead, Hardcore Cheese 5, and Qazplm for their help in making this video, and all the other videos they have helped me with. Also, these runs are streamed over on my Kick, which is where I stream at nowadays. So make sure you guys follow me over there, as I go live pretty much every day. To get notifications for whenever I go live, you can simply join my Discord server at discord.gg/EZScape and set up notifications there in the click of a button, and you can also set up notifications for new YouTube videos. Anyways guys, that's all I have for today's video. Subscribe for more speedrunning related content, and as always, I hope you all have a beautiful life.